Hey guys, welcome to this week's Roundup. There's some cool things to report on, as well as some awesome Q&As as usual. And then at the end, we have an interview with Chris Covell, one of the the original contributors to a lot of the retro gaming stuff. Also, my band's booking a couple of small shows around the New York City area in the next month or so, and it would be awesome if anybody in the area wanted to treat it like a meetup. We'll all just hang out beforehand, drink a couple of beers, and talk about gaming and trade stuff if you have any. I'll just post more information on that when I have it, and let me know in the comments if that's something anybody would even be interested in. But I guess let's just jump right into the news. First up, I finally posted that review of the Toro that I had been promising. So for everybody that asked, I'm sorry it took so long, and I'm trying to catch up with all the stuff I've had to do on the website. And I'd really like to do a lot more of these, just because sometimes a page is great to have all the stuff listed, but you just can't demonstrate something without a video sometimes. Other times I think it's the opposite. Other times I think a quick 2-minute video of like, here's the thing, and then a page for reference is better, but at least having both is kind of a help for everybody. So I'll try to stay on top of it and won't take so long to do the rest. But I'll put the link in the description for anybody that was curious who didn't see it yet. Last week, somebody posted a video on YouTube about how they got light guns working on flat screen TVs. It's kind of a combo solution of using the Wiimote to actually sense where on the screen the thing you're trying to shoot is, and then fooling the existing light gun into thinking that it sees it. So I'm really oversimplifying it. You got to check out the video if you're interested, but it was really neat, and it completely kind of took it from a different perspective. And I really think that this exact solution's a bit overcomplicated to actually sell. It's one step closer. And it's something that maybe somebody can sell, like a light gun, a generic looking light gun with a sensor bar, and then with kind of like the Bliss box, just an adapter that would allow you to plug it into each console, and it would kind of just do the same thing that this guy does. So hopefully ChipOS81 is the screen name. Hopefully he's already on top of that, thinking about ways to sell it, or maybe he could just contact Sean Green from Blissbox and see, if their ideas are similar at all. But any way to get light guns working on flat screens, even if it's kind of cheating with the sensor bar, is still good enough for me, because I love sinking into a good game every now and then and killing some time, but every now and then you just want to shoot stuff for 10 minutes, and playing Duck Hunt or Safari Hunt or any of those games is just hilarious, just shooting little 8-bit stuff across the screen. And I just think it's something that's missing from a lot of games nowadays. So hopefully this is one more step in the right direction, but if not, it was still a really cool video to watch, and anybody that's into anything even remotely nerdy should check it out. And speaking of light guns, somebody uploaded a video that showed how they took a NES Zapper and turned it into a laser gun. So it's not really gaming related, but it's really neat, so check out the video, and just wanted to mention it really quickly. Kind of a sad update to another Metroid 2 remake. Originally, Nintendo had just issued a takedown request for the link to download the game and to one post on his blog. So it really was kind of fair, at least in my opinion. But now they just sent a takedown request for his personal email address. So now they're starting to go after him directly, which is not cool at all. I mean, they really dropped the ball in the Metroid series. Here, some guy comes out and does something better than they've done since Zero Mission, in my opinion. I mean, so 10 years now, plus. And instead of embracing it and trying to, maybe buy the project from him, use it, have him license it, whatever, they just go after him. And I understand having to protect their IP. I mean, at the end of the day, they're a business. But still, this is not the way you treat people who love your games and your products. So the only thing that we could do is keep sharing it and keep playing it and keep talking about it, because I know the retro gaming community is a small part of what they have to cater to, but it's still a part. So if we just keep playing it, keep sharing it with everybody else, and keep talking about it, it is a big old middle finger to Nintendo. So really sorry to hear about it. Was really looking forward to a small update here and there. But anybody who has the latest version of it, all the bugs are fixed. There was only like 2 little ones anyway. And the game is amazing. So try to keep it alive just by keep playing it and talking about it, and hopefully Nintendo will get their heads out of their asses eventually. Some updates about the Game Boy Advance EverDrive. First, Crix has uploaded a new firmware that allows support for emulators, so you could play like Game Gear games on Game Boy Advance, which, it's emulation, so it's not perfect, but kind of fun. And all of those are actually already included in the Smoke Monster ROM set, so if you already have that, they're already right there. And I think the firmware has a few bug fixes, minor things. And also, some of the people on the Crix forums have actually posted patches for tilt games. So a few of the games that required the tilt sensor in the cartridge to work wouldn't work on the EverDrive, but now they do with just a simple patch. So just wanted to keep everybody updated, and it's good to see that the scene keeps growing with every new EverDrive that he releases. In more Game Boy Advance news, Shmups user Woozle has posted an update to his project, which is essentially a Game Boy Advance TV out project. He's able to output both RGB and HDMI directly, and he's been making some really great progress. There were a few other projects floating around for maybe a year or two now, probably more than that, and they've just never gained traction, and I think he's gotten farther than most of them. So it's looking like we might actually have a solution, whether it's a consoleized Game Boy Advance or you have to pull the board out and put it in a box, but a solution that, with a DVI connector that could output RGB, VGA, or HDMI in multiple resolutions with scan lines. So I'm really, really excited because there's a bunch of awesome Game Boy Advance games that translate really well to a big screen. So I'll keep everybody updated on the progress. If you want to check it yourself, you could follow the forum. And I've been talking to him as well. I'm going to try to get him a stack of Game Boy Advances to experiment on. So hopefully there'll be a lot more progress than that, and we'll all be able to buy one of these within a year or so. I just received an FDS stick this week, which is essentially like a ROM cart for the Famicom Disk System. And I will be doing a video on it this week, probably in a day or two, and it's not going to be like the Toro video. It really will be up quickly. I just wanted to mention it because this thing is absolutely awesome, and it's cheap, and I'm way more impressed than I thought I would be with it. So a full video review to come in a day or two, and I'll leave the link in the description for what exactly it does. But anybody that has a Famicom Disk System might want one of these just to save the wear and tear on the drive itself. So just figured I would throw that in here. Brian from RetroUSB just uploaded a video about how he tested lag on the AVS and other NES consoles. So basically he added an LED light to a NES controller so that when you press the button and the command is received by the console, the light goes on. So if you use a slow motion camera, you'll actually be able to see and count the frames of how long it takes for the person to actually jump. So he used this for testing both the lag on his flat screens as well as the lag on the AVS itself. And we had talked about that a lot last week during his interview, and it was really cool to see it in action. So I plan on building one of these soon enough and trying to use the same method myself. And even try comparing it to like the CRT stopwatch method just to see. But it was pretty neat, and I always love stuff like this, so I just wanted to share it. HD Retrovision just announced that their cables will be going back on sale September 10th at 6 p.m. Central Time. So they were able to get one small batch out a few months ago that sold out immediately. So I actually remember uploading the podcast a day early just to be able to get it up in time for people to know about these. So I'm not sure if this is a full stock now or if it's just another partial stock, but if you were waiting for one of these, I would definitely jump on it to make sure that they're not sold out. The Wall Street Journal just uploaded an article that claims that the Nintendo NX will use cartridges, just like it was rumored before. So the more I read about it, the more it almost seems like the true successor to the 3DS that can also be hooked up to a TV. So, I'm keeping my hopes up, and I hope it's awesome, and I hope it's really exciting, but it just, the more news you get about it, the weirder it gets. So I'll keep everybody updated with any real news, and I'm sure something as big as the NX release would probably be all over the place. So I doubt this podcast would be the first place you'd hear it, but I'll still put any news in that's actually solid. But the Wall Street Journal at least has a little bit more credibility than a random gaming blog, so I just figured I'd mention it. One last quick thing before we get into the Q&A. I'm not sure if this is news or anything. I just wanted to talk a little bit about, I'm doing Let's Plays, I guess that's what the kids are calling it these days, but of the game Axiom Verge. That's been out for a while, and it just came out on the Wii U last week. And it's an awesome game, and I love it. But I've been trying to do both live streams and actually upload the gameplay videos to YouTube. but I'm trying to do it in a non-annoying way. So I really pride myself in the fact that, like, I don't tweet or post on Facebook unless it's important, or it's, just like, hey, the update's live now or something. Um, but, I don't want to spam people's inboxes, and I certainly don't want people to stop following me because they keep getting a pop-up every day saying, live stream of Axiom Verge. So I kind of wanted everybody's feedback on that. Is it annoying to have the pop-ups? Should I disable that for the live streaming? And, it's not something I'll be doing a lot. It's just something I really wanted to try just to see what it was like. Some people jumped on immediately when I was doing it the other day, and it was really cool. But the first time I actually did it live, I had no idea I was live. I'd been practicing on Twitch all day, and I figured, all right, well, let me just use the multicast program and do both Twitch and YouTube at the same time. And when I did it, a buddy of mine, like, I hit stream, and I'm walking around, kind of getting everything set up, and I get a text from a buddy of mine, like, oh, hey, I see your live stream's up, I'm watching. I went, what? What are you talking about? I didn't realize that YouTube sent the auto email out to everybody saying they're live streaming now, so sorry, I kind of scrambled over and then had some major audio issues, so I got all that fixed up. But I just wanted everybody's feedback. Do you guys mind if that pops up, a couple times a week? Does anybody want to see those? I personally, like, I wouldn't jump in for a live stream unless it was something I knew I was going to interact in. My buddies were on, or something I really wanted to see. But I would, and I very often do sometimes, leave up the playthroughs because I have like 2 monitors up, and I'll throw a playthrough on another one, and I'll kind of go and, oh yeah, I remember that part of the game, I missed that section, and it's kind of like listening to music in the background, but gaming, at least for me. So anybody's feedback on that. I just basically want to keep doing all the fun stuff I've been doing without annoying any of the people that have been supporting me. So definitely leave me your thoughts, and if you're into Axiom Verge, I'm going to try to do a live stream once a day for like an hour until either I beat the game or I get bored of it and give up. So I don't know, let me know what you think. Now on to the Q&A stuff. Timothy Vreeland asks, if you're upscaling a 240p source to 1080p, wouldn't that distort and stretch the pixels, since 1080 isn't equally divisible by 240 like 480 and 720 are? Yeah, definitely. And this is something that we can go into a really long discussion on, so I'm just going to give the very short version and then point you to the links on where to go if you'd like more info. But basically, that's where the FrameMeister really comes in handy, and the Firebrand X profiles. Because, yes, it isn't equally divisible, and you get 4.5x where things are kind of stretched and weird looking. But with Firebrand X's profiles, you either have 4x, so there's a black bar all around the image, or 5x, where it cuts off a little bit of the top and bottom. But that's actually okay in most cases, because games back then were designed knowing that CRTs would cut off a little bit through overscan. So there really isn't usually too much super important information on the very top or very bottom, making it look pretty good. But if you're talking simply about things like the AVS or even 480p games into 1080, it does get a little weird, because then you're relying on your TV scaler to stretch it, and that doesn't always look so great. Sometimes adding another scaler at the end of that, like the DVDO scalers or anything else, or I guess even a FrameMeister would help. But it's really something that's not going to be as big a deal with 4K TVs, because you could integer scale right into 4K. But it's a good question, and I hope the short answer kind of pointed you in the right direction, and I'll post links below for the visual explanation, which I made in a fancy MS Paint drawing of, as well as the upscaler comparison page, which kind of goes into all of these things if you want more detail. So I hope the short answer was good. I just didn't really want to sit here and ramble when there's other questions to get to, so sorry if I didn't really cover it. And speaking of the FrameMeister, Uzmaki82 said that he ordered a FrameMeister, but the max resolution of his HD TV is only 720p, and should he still use Firebrand X's profiles? So no, they're specifically designed for 1080p, and for the short term, just use the generic 720p setting on the FrameMeister, but Firebrand X is actually in the middle of designing 720p profiles for the same exact reason. So obviously just generic 720p will look fine because it's an integer of 240, but there's still the overscan issues, keeping the pixels aligned perfectly, which Firebrand X is just awesome at that. So I would definitely say it's good enough for now, but when his 720 profiles come out, definitely switch to using those. You'll probably notice a big difference. Next, Daniel Slotkin asked that since there are so many HDMI mods for the Nintendo now, will there be any for the Super Nintendo coming up? And unfortunately, it doesn't look like anytime soon. I've been told that this is because the way Super Nintendo processes video is different than the Nintendo, so you're not easily able to get a digital output to convert right into HDMI as you would with a Nintendo. I was actually told that the more likely scenario would be an analog to digital converter, kind of like having an open source CAN converter, but wired directly into the Super Nintendo. And I'm obviously oversimplifying this just to keep it short, but unfortunately, I think it's a chance that we might not actually see an HDMI SNES mod at all until something like an FPGA-based SNES would come out. And that really, I mean, the SNES is my favorite system, so I would love an HDMI mod for it. It just doesn't look like anybody's started that project, or it's as easy as the NES. And I know the NES HDMI was not easy at all, but I think it would be way harder. So if I hear anything from anybody, even a rumor, I'll talk about it on the podcast. But for the short term, I really wouldn't expect anything, unfortunately. Next, Matthias Ferrero asked, can you tell us how the FrameMeister and open source CAN converter handles 720p from component? Well, first, the OSSC doesn't. I'm pretty sure it was only 480p and 240p. And as far as the FrameMeister goes, I've never tried that, but I asked around, and most of the people that I asked said it kind of softens the image a bit, so they just either use the pass-through or not at all. They just plug it directly into their HD TV. So maybe people in the comments might be able to chime in on that and let me know what they think. I think something like a DVDO scaler might be better for 720p and up, but I'm really not an expert at that. I generally just plug 720p directly into my plasma and let it handle it. So any comments would be appreciated. And lastly, Patrick Trainer had two questions. His first was how to split an RGB signal in regards to something we talked about last week. And the answer to that is I don't know of any SCART splitters out there that are good quality and reliable. If anybody does, please let me know. But if you want to just split an RGB signal, you could always make your own cables and use a VGA splitter, or you could use an Extron RXI box. Just keep in mind that one of the outputs is processed and the other is not processed. So if you wanted to split like a sync on green signal from PlayStation 2, one of the outputs could be RGBS, but the other one will still be sync on green. So just something to keep in the back of your mind. And the other question was if you could use the SCART to BNC cables that you normally would use to go from like a switch to a monitor and do the opposite. And yes, and in fact, when I was testing the PS2 sync on green stuff through that Extron, I took my SCART to BNC cable and simply modified the sync cable, and now I was able to go BNC to SCART. So the reason for this is SCART cables are directional. The RGB lines are always the same, but sync has an in and out, and same with audio, I believe. And if you're just going video signals, BNC to SCART or vice versa, the only pin you have to worry about is sync, and then you would just go 20 to 19 or 19 to 20, depending on what your solution was. So it's very easy. It's only one pin. Just pop the SCART side open. I think some people have even installed a switch in their SCART cables, so they're able to go from in and out, which is kind of a cool idea as well. So hopefully that was a good answer to the questions. Next up, we have a great interview with Chris Covell, somebody who's been contributing to the retro gaming scene for a very long time. I had a great time on the interview, but he was very humble and downplayed a lot of the work that he'd done, so I'll do all the bragging for him. The first thing that I noticed about Chris was a page called I Want My RGB. And this really was kind of what got me started on my website, because at the time, his was the only page I could find that was a reliable website you can go to, not just a forum post that sometimes the forums go down or things happen. And I'd really just used his work as a jumping off point for mine. And on that page, he compared composite to RGB, and then even used emulation as a reference too. And it was great. It was, really just a perfect start for me. That and the GameXX page, actually. And then he also was one of the first people to do Game Gear to Master System conversions, so to allow you to play it through a ROM card of sorts. And that was a very big deal for me, because I'd loved certain Game Gear games, but the ones that were Game Gear only, the really only choices were to use an RGB out or to just play them on the Game Gear. And that work actually really ballooned up in the past few years. When I had first talked about that, I had then posted on SMS Power and kind of said, hey, this is a great idea. I see other people have done conversions as well. There was probably 5 or 6 at the time, and some were really great. But, could we do more of these? Because, this is something that everybody would benefit from. Anybody that had either a Genesis or an SMS ROM cart as well. And it just started to really balloon. Guys were on there just doing a ton of conversions and a lot of great work. And it got to the point where I even stopped putting the conversions on my site because I was administering both that and the one on SMS Power. So now my page is more of a reference, and there's over 50 conversions. And, he was one of the guys that laid the groundwork for this. So I really wanted to interview him and kind of talk about where he came from, how he got started, other work he's been doing. And sometimes when I'm doing these interviews, I forget that I'm doing an interview because it feels like I'm just, hanging out, having a beer at a bar with one of my buddies talking about nerdy things that I love to talk about. So we did get a little bit sidetracked, but, the whole Canadian moving to Japan and kind of hearing his story, I really liked it, and I hope that you guys were into it too. And I'm sorry if I rambled a little bit too much. I wasn't on the top of my game. I wasn't really feeling too well the night we did it, but as always, comments, let me know what you think, any suggestions or improvements, and I really hope you guys enjoy listening to it as much as I did, kind of having a conversation with him. So here you go, Chris Covell. Hey guys, we're here with Chris Covell. Thanks so much, man, for coming on and trying to get this done.
It's no problem. Yeah,
so,
thanks.
For everybody watching, we just spent like 5 minutes trying to get both of our video cameras working, and it was kind of funny because one would work, one wouldn't work, and everything else, and it's just, I think everybody just assumes that nerds like us are like 1,000 pounds, so I just want want everybody to see, like, we're all normal. I mean, I packed on like 1 million pounds last year, but whatever. You didn't, so
well,
no one has
it's neck up, so we're safe.
Yeah, Chris's little avatar for his screen name is like a ninja, him dressed as a ninja, so I threatened to have that as what would be up in the video if we didn't get the camera working. So, although you as a ninja
should change that sometime.
Kind of cool, actually. So, but well, man, I've been wanting to talk to you for a long time. I think the first time I stumbled across your posts were for the Game Boy Advance, the innovation adapter, where you figured out RGB for it or something.
I just saw a picture of that online. Somebody had already done it.
Yeah, it was 1 million years ago, I think. And
yeah.
So, what I ask everybody is, what I'm genuinely curious about is, how did you get started in all this stuff? Do you have a background in tech, or did you just, like messing?
I don't have any whatsoever, really. Back in elementary school, I had like a 101 electronics kit from Radio Shack, and it was fun to play around with, and I followed like the instructions in the manual, but I didn't really get or understand what all the electronic components really did. I mean, I knew a resistor provided resistance, but transistors, capacitors, I really quite didn't get it. So I'm not really a good hardware or tech guy. And kind of the same thing. My first actual home system was again a Radio Shack TRS-80 color computer.
I had one of those with the tape adapter, so you put the cassette tape in.
That's right.
Yeah.
And I could never get the tape to work. I had Puyan on tape, and that never worked. So I stuck to cartridges. And I learned BASIC. It was it was useful.
Me too,
I didn't quite. Yeah, I didn't. Stuff like arrays and dim, all that stuff.
I never got super deep into it, but I definitely knew how to work the language in and out. So
yeah, I was a little bit too young for that. So both on the basic side and the hardware side, I had fun with that as a child, but I really didn't understand it. Not well enough to actually be a ninja.
It's funny, kids these days will never understand what it's like to be a kid, and you have a choice between, like, for me, my dad made me a tape of Jethro Tull, always a little metalhead, but
cool.
And I could either listen to Aqualung, or I could save the program that I just wrote, which I think was this mind-blowingly complicated program where if you typed in like 2 + 2, it says = 4 or something, something like a child program like that. So yeah. It's funny how those things used to work.
Yeah. So. Yeah, I could never get tape saving to work either. I mean, it kind of worked. I guess it did work. I remember, saving things, but it's, never really got that far. And when the Nintendo, the NES came along, that was goodbye Coco too.
Yeah.
And I kept it, but I actually pulled it apart and just Well, of course, I was one of those guys who pulled stuff apart with screwdrivers all the time. So I did that with the all my stuff as well.
I think
But
all of us nerds did as kids.
yeah,
And then when
of
we
course.
broke something, I'd use the wires in one to work on another thing because it's
Yeah.
free wires and things.
Yeah, absolutely. So, yeah, Nintendo came along, and then I kind of was a gamer, not really a programmer. But around in high school, I took computer science classes, computer programming classes, and that was the first year was just memorizing stuff that we did in class on the test, and because that's all you needed to do, just regurgitate stuff. It was at Pascal. But then in the second year of computer programming, they made you actually, create stuff and think about it. So that was a lot of fun. So I started with programming from late high school into college, and that's how it started for me. But in college, we were learning C++, which was all right, but it's a big headache. And then in my second year of college, we actually also did computer architecture, where we learned 8086 assembly, and that was a hell of a lot more fun than C++. So I had more fun doing assembly stuff and doing weird things on the computers in the lab, making it beep and piss everybody off.
Yeah.
So that's kind of where it started. I started with learning assembly in college, and then really wanting to learn how to program in assembly on like a Commodore 64 or NES or other, some other systems. So that's kind of how I started, just learning, figuring out what documents there were online at that time. This would be around 1997 or so.
Yeah. I tried my hand at programming, and then I very quickly found out that I don't have the attention span for it. And what really got me was a friend of mine. It was actually my friend's older brother, who then, a million years later, we ended up becoming very good friends. He gave me a programming book. It might have been Linux-based. I forgot exactly what it was, but I made it through Chapter 1. Great. Made it through Chapter 2, and at the end of Chapter 2, it says, okay, well, just copy down the script and, make sure that the screen blinks, whatever it was supposed to do. So I tried it. Nothing works. I read through every line, nothing works. And there was, 70 lines in that thing. I finally went, you know what, screw it, let me go to Chapter 3. And the first line of Chapter 3 is, so the program didn't work. Welcome to programming. That's what it's like to write programs. I just went, close, goodbye. And never,
It's too
it kind
cruel.
of turned me off. He thought it was funny. He loved the book and said it was his transition into programming. And I read it and went, oh, hell no. Nope, I'm out.
Yeah.
Hey. But.
Yeah, well, with if you're using somebody else's libraries in like C or something else, then you don't know where it went wrong, and that I would give up doing that too.
Yeah.
With assembly, at least I know it's entirely my fault, unless it's some electrical problem.
The one thing I used to write a ton of was batch file scripts, which anybody who knows DOS is probably laughing at me right now, like, yes, idiot, you can write 10 lines in a thing, but I would actually write these long ones that would do very complicated software distribution packages. So you'd be able to push out, now, for anybody who's in IT now, to pixie boot a remote computer and throw an OS on it, it's like, maybe a full day's worth of writing it and a day's worth of testing and you're done. 10 plus years ago, that was not the case. You actually had to write everything. You had to set the timer commands on each one. No, I loved it. I actually thought that was awesome, but that's as far as I got, was complicated batch files, and then for me.
Okay.
But,
All
so
right,
what got you pushing from the assembly code and the 8086 code to hacking Game Gear games? Like, what was the transition for that?
I don't know. Well, I came to Japan in 2002, and I had.
So you're originally from the States, based on your accent?
I'm from Canada. I'm from
Canada.
Vancouver, BC. Yeah.
There you go. I think that makes me a racist now. Shit. From
It's
Canada
all right.
to Japan.
Yeah. You don't sound like you're from New York either.
I'm from kind of by New York, but
Okay.
close enough.
Yeah. So I grew up in Vancouver, Canada.
Okay.
And 2002, when I graduated university, I came to Japan and started teaching English, and I'm still in Japan now.
Still teaching English?
Yeah.
Sweet.
That's what I, after college, after 2 years of college, computer science and math especially got way too tough, so I flipped over to English. as a major, and that's what was a lot more fun and well, better for me anyway.
Yeah.
So yeah, I also got like a teaching ESL certificate in university, and so that's why I came to Japan basically to teach as a career. And so Japan's a bit different from North America.
Very.
Things are really cheap. I mean, old used games are really, really, really cheap. And well, there are certain booms, but like price inflation, but it never gets as bad as it does in North America, I'm sure. And
Yeah,
probably
I asked my buddy Jordan, who lives out there as well, to get me a stack of stuff a few months ago, and he just did it for cost, and I was able to do so much testing that I would have never afforded to be able to do because he just picked it all up for cheap prices, boxed it up, and sent it to me. So
yeah. So it is a paradise. It's an electronics paradise, and so I got my paycheck. I went to like used game shops or junk shops and found, oh, hey, here's a Game Gear for 200 yen, about $2, and here are games 50 cents each. And so I just picked up things that I've never played before, and I kind of knew about Sega Master System and Game Gear stuff before, even though I've never owned them. But I knew which games were kind of good, so I picked them up because they were cheap. And of course, the Game Gear screen sucks.
yes, it does.
So I opened it up like I usually would, and just plug an AV cord into the TV, and just tapped the tip of the cord on all the pins on the CPU or whatever inside the Game Gear, just to see what it would look like. And I found some video, so that was the start. I got some video working on the TV from the Game Gear, and that was pretty cool. And I got a flash cartridge for the Game Gear as well, so I could play all the Game Gear games.
Was that NeverDrive, or was there something that was out before?
Sorry, no. Actually, it was a Sega Master System flash card from Tototech.
Oh, okay.
In Hong Kong, and they used to make a bunch of flash cartridges.
Right, yeah.
Yeah, so I had a Master System flash card and a wide gear adapter, which lets you put Master System cartridges on the Game Gear.
Right. Yep.
So I had a Game Gear flash cartridge as well. So
I think it was the Master Gear converter in the States.
Oh, Master Gear. Yeah, sorry. Right.
Yeah.
Master. Yeah. It's also called the Gear Master. There are two different companies make them.
Right. Yeah, Sega
System.
always would license their stuff like that. Gear Master, Master Gear, and most of it was a little bit different too. So you'd notice like one game would work on one, but not the other, or vice versa.
Yeah. So that Tototech flash cartridge worked with the Gear Master. So unofficial one. It didn't work with the Master Gear.
Right.
But anyway, so I could get a Game Gear flash cartridge, and so that was fun playing Game Gear games. And for years people have been saying, hey, like on SMS Power, where people do all Master System programmers converge. Hey, who's going to make like convert a Game Gear game to Master System? Who's going to do that? Basically, nobody did. They just talk about it for years and years. Who's going to do it? And it doesn't hurt to start trying. So I started just with Woody Pop and saw, on the Gear Master, I put in a switch, which switched one of the pins between Master System mode and Game Gear mode. And so if you flip the switch on the cartridge, the Game Gear works in Master System mode. So you can play Game Gear games in Master System mode where the color's all screwed up.
Right.
So all that's left over is just fixing the game so it doesn't screw up the colors.
So for people that aren't familiar with that, that's because the Master System and the Game Gear were so similar, with really just only the color limitations from the Master System. When they would program games, they would actually just program the same game that could be burned to the two different carts with one little flag on it that says, this is a Master System, this is a Game Gear. So
yeah, pretty much. Yeah. The screen dimensions are still the same on the Game Gear as a Master System, but when it's in Game Gear mode, it just puts a little window of that screen map on the Game Gear screen. So
if I could remember correctly, it's when the Game Gear processes. It's not 320 by 240. It's the 256 by
192.
192. But it processes the full resolution of the Master System, but only displays on the screen.
Yeah, just a little window.
Right,
Yeah,
so that's the
and
thing.
so
It's almost like you have, this is what it's processing, but this is what it's displaying.
that's right. Yeah.
So being able to put something into Master System mode, you actually get the full screen out of it.
You get the full screen, and on a lot of Game Gear games, it's just garbage because they don't have to put stuff in there.
And that's what caused the big issue, because games like Sonic the Hedgehog for Master System is totally
only draw
different
the
than the
edges.
Genesis version. But if you ever put two side by side, you actually could see that it's just a carved out version of the Master System.
Yeah.
So when you turn that flag on or just use the Master System version, you get the full game. But for the ones that were designed specifically for the Game Gear, they never bothered to program the rest of it, so you get garbage and weird artifacts happening or repeating frames or stuff like that.
Yeah, that's pretty much it. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
They're so similar. The only thing to do is just fix up the game programming, make the screen a bit wider, or get rid of bugs, and that's basically it. Yeah.
So the first one of your conversions that I saw is it Aleste in Power Strike? Is that how you pronounce Aleste or something? I'm out of these. Aleste?
Alesta.
Alesta.
But yeah, we say Alest.
Alest.
I say Alest anyway.
Everybody always makes fun of me. I can't pronounce anything. When it comes to language, your typical dumb American. Not for culture, but for language, definitely. I can't pronounce anything. So.
Alesta. The word Alesta is a mangled romanization of lightning arrestor, and that's where it comes from.
That makes the game even more badass now. I like it.
So a lightning rod in Japanese uses an old English word, lightning arrestor, and so they cut off the word lightning and use arrestor, and then they mangle that into aresta in Japanese, and so that's where it comes from.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah. Actually, but anyway, the first Game Gear game I did was Woody Pop.
Woody Pop, right?
And that would randomly crash because I didn't really know at the time about some of the ports that needed to be cut out, some Z80 port rights that needed
So when
to be
you
cut
just
out.
started hacking into this, were you basically doing the software equivalent of tapping on the pins with your video hooked up to it, or did you actually have some kind of...
I looked at a disassembly, or I looked at it in the debugger in Mecha, the emulator, and all you have to do is figure out where does it write to the palette and make that palette not 64 bytes but 32 bytes or something like that, or whatever size it was. I kind of forget now. Mm-hmm. And also get rid of the Game Gear games polling of the interface, the communications port, because that causes the game to crash, among some other things. And so I kind of knew what I was doing, but I didn't know not all the ports that the Game Gear used worked on the Master System. So later on, people on the SMS Power forum said, "Don't forget to cut this write out or this read out," and that made the games not crash. Mm-hmm. So the first working one I put out was Pop Breaker, a conversion of that, and it never came out in North America, so you would know it. But it's a pretty fun puzzle action game. And the game used the whole 256. Actually, the whole game map is already written in the video RAM. So on the Game Gear, it scrolls around this map that's 256 by 192. But if you put that into Sega Master System mode, it's mostly all on screen. And so there was not a lot of things that had to be changed.
Yeah, I remember playing your conversion, and I think the only reason I even knew that game existed was because of the conversion. And I remember that it was really cool. It looked pretty good. So
yeah, I found it for like 50 yen in the shops, and it's got a cute girl and a tank on the cartridge label, so why not buy it?
Agreed.
That's kind of like what you can do. You can test out random games when they're that cheap. So yeah, and it is a fun game. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah.
The real limitation of the Master System compared to the Game Gear is that the palette is quite limited. The Game Gear can do 4,096 colors. That's its full palette, and the Master System can only do 64. So if you have
that was the one thing I never understood, is because I do prefer the Game Gear to Master System conversions over just playing Game Gear hooked up to an RGB monitor, because even with the garbage, you do get the full screen, you get some other advantages. But the one thing I didn't understand is, I think I was talking to Chili Willy a few years ago, which I haven't emailed with him in a long time. I don't know if he's still even doing anything with Sega related, but he said he was actually working on an emulator so that you could run Game Gear games through a 32X using a Genesis ROM cart, because the palette's the same and you'd be able to pretty much map everything in real time. And then I haven't heard from him in about 2 years, so I'm not sure if he ever finished that or not. But
I think the number of people that own a 32X and a Game Gear and want to do that is so limited.
True, but I think the amount of people that like Game Gear, it far exceeds the amount of people that like 32X and would probably go buy a 32X just for that option. So
okay, yeah. I mean, it's kind of cool, but I think it's just better to get the RGB or other video mod boards for the Game Gear and put those in, or get somebody to put those in. That probably be a bit better.
The one thing that really I was kind of, I guess, shocked when I played it was the best way I could describe it, because I distinctly remember being a kid and wanting to love my Game Gear. It was color and it was backlit, and Game Boy was great, but it's color, and I just remember sitting there just going, all right, hold on, let me hold it. Oh, now somebody opened a window. Let me hold it this way now, and just it was the Mick Will mod where you put the LCD screen in it. Have you played with that yet?
I've seen it. I don't think I want to get one of those LCD screens. For one, I'm kind of done with Game Gear. I'm done. But also, those don't really integer scale, and that drives me crazy. You probably know.
They don't, and that normally drives me batshit crazy. But it was just his implementation of it was very well done. He does the cropping in a way where it didn't bother me, and it was being able to hold and see the games that I used to love as a kid, but actually be able to see them without
true. It is clear.
It did kind of blow my mind. I wish he had found a 320 by 240 screen, because they do exist. So I kind of just wish he had that and scaled it up. But.
Yeah, if they find a better screen, that I would probably jump at it. There are lots of app games, portable Game Gears or Genesises or whatever, and sometimes they use the wrong LCD screen, and so they have to upscale stuff, or sometimes just stretch to 16:9 ratio, and that.
Oh, I hate that. Have you played the At Games one though? Because that's the one I've seen. I've never tried, and it looked cool. But
no, I haven't. Maybe I have actually. But I didn't buy it or anything. I saw it. That's about all.
Because I keep seeing it, and I just don't know if it's worth buying or not, if it's even worth wasting my time, or if it'll, because there was a couple of Game Boy Color clones, and I wanted them to work so badly, backlit screen and everything. And the one that I got, everybody complained about the buttons. It was the GB Boy Color, and the buttons weren't too bad, but the vertical scrolling, the aspect ratio was so far off that it would just tear.
It was wrong.
I couldn't stand it. So
so that's kind of going into one of my pet peeves about playing retro games. Fine if I don't own some rare system. It's great to play it on a computer or something else. But if I own it, I don't want it filtered or non-integer upscaled.
Agreed.
And I don't want to have screen tearing.
I hate it. Game Boy Advance is the worst for that.
Yeah. Also, lag is bad for all these things that piss me off about modern gaming, or modern emulation anyway.
Right.
I already have all my old systems. I'm keeping them, so I don't want anything just getting in the way.
Do you have an RGB monitor that you use out there?
Yeah.
It's not going to get much better than that, then.
Exactly, yeah. And so there's a lot of excitement over HDMI upscalers or, component to HDMI converters. I actually don't own any TVs that can show HDMI. So I'm until my CRTs, bite the dust, I'll be happy. After that, then I'll see what's on the market at that time. But for now, I don't really own any HDMI stuff. So HDMI Nintendos, it's great. I can't use them though. HDMI retro boxes, they only put out HDMI. I can't really use those either.
Some of the HDMI retro boxes are all software emulation anyway. Like the Retron 5, I kind of didn't like it at first anyway. I did I spent all day doing a write-up on it because I'd gotten more emails about that than anything else. And then on top of that, when you found out it was stolen software from RetroArch, it's just, I wanted to throw that thing in the garbage. So,
there are many things that kind of get in the way of enjoyment. I guess I'm a purist, but it's HDMI and LCD TVs are great technology, but they should perform better than 1980s technology. That's kind of my opinion, and in a lot of ways they don't.
Agreed. And my cousin
Yeah.
Scott, who was on the podcast a few weeks ago, still doesn't own a flat screen TV for this exact reason. He has a
Yeah.
really gorgeous 34-inch Sony widescreen tube TV.
Yeah.
And for retro games, it processes 240p as 480i, but for anything 480p and above, it's amazing. And, there's no lag in it. It's a great TV, but
Yeah.
he's the same way. But I actually I was lucky enough to have a job where I got to go to CES. I used to get to travel the whole world. And I saw something called SED TVs, which are forgotten technology. I forgot what it stood for, but it was a joint technology between Canon and Toshiba.
Okay.
And then right before they launched it, there was a patent dispute, and they just canceled it. They canceled the factory in Japan. They canceled everything.
Oh,
but
man.
each pixel, and I'm oversimplifying this, by the way, but each pixel was essentially its own tube. So you got zero lag. Although it was a pixel-based thing, it could be off resolution. It wouldn't look all crazy. And it blew my mind when I saw the demo of it. And then I guess, for whatever reason, I'm sure there was politics involved in that too, but it was just... then I go back to LCD, and I'm like,
it could have been so good.
It could have. But OLED has some really great potential. As long as they get the lag down, I was super impressed with OLED. But generally speaking, you're right, When people go into a Best Buy and they say, oh, yeah, I just got a 50-inch TV for $170, how do you think that's going to look?
Yeah.
Terrible lag, everything tears, just 1080p tears. So it's... I feel your pain with the CRTs.
Yeah, I don't want to sound like a tech snob or a retro snob. I'm just a cheapskate. I have old tube TVs in my house because I've held on to them. It's not like I've turned up my nose at newer things. It's just my old things still work, and so why not keep them?
No, that's a good perspective to have too. In my bedroom, I got a crappy flat screen 4K TV because I just wanted something small. How often you really sit down and watch TV before you go to sleep? In my living room, one of the guys I used to work with, he's a very high-end installer for home theater stuff, and he called me one day and he said, hey, there's a $4,000 TV that Costco somehow has, and they're getting rid of because it's overstock. Do you have $900 on you for a $4,000 TV? I booked it straight. I signed up for the membership. I bought it, brought it home. He came by a couple weeks later, and he told me the burn-in process where you got to leave an SD card in so it puts the colors in. And he came by and calibrated it, which he usually charges like insane amounts of money for it. But I recovered a dead hard drive for him, so he owed me one. So now that is the one thing. For less than $1,000, I do get to watch movies that look freaking phenomenal. It's still not the best for games. It's about 2.5 frames of lag, but... Yeah, 3D movies on that thing are way better than 3D movies in a theater, so I'm lucky with that. But
yeah, if I had time to watch movies, I'd probably really like that. Yeah.
Yeah.
I went to my my friend's house who lives around here to play some Famicom games, and I said, hey, what do you want to play? Let's play like Rockman. Let's play Mega Man 2. And I said, okay, so I hooked it up, and I turned it on. What the hell? I missed a jump. And I landed right in the pit. Oh, right.
That's right.
Lag.
Have you ever seen the Phone Dork video about that?
Yeah, I did.
I was absolutely dying when I
Man.
saw that, because that was my exact reaction in the same spot of the game when you're trying to jump on the falling platforms, and he's swearing at the TV. I'm like, that's exactly what lag is like. That's perfect.
I didn't get angry. I just had totally forgotten about it when I went to a different person's house.
Yeah.
And so the more I pushed the button and the jumps got delayed, I thought, okay, I'm going to wait till technology improves.
Yeah.
If it ever does, yeah.
I love new technology. I love learning about it and playing with it, but I always want what I feel like is the best, which is why, I'll play a brand new game like, Shovel Knight, but I'll also go back and play Super Metroid because I don't really care that it's 20-something years old. I just want to play what I feel like is the best thing for me to play. So it's the same thing with the technology. Very often I'll play things on my RGB monitors, which, I'm so lucky to have, but, occasionally I just want to play, especially a slower-paced game, it's kind of nice to play it on a big 50-inch screen sometimes. So
it is, yeah.
I try to capitalize on both, I guess is the best way to say it. But
yeah, it probably depends on what mood you're in. whether you want like a theatrical experience, it's better on a big TV.
Laziness too. I live in a small apartment, so pulling out the RGB monitor and hooking everything up, I get everything all, pulling everything out of the boxes to hook everything up. Sometimes it's nice just to grab, the new AVS and plug it right in.
Of course,
Nintendo, But.
Yeah. So about RGB monitors, in Canada I had an Amiga, and so I had like a Commodore monitor with that, and that would work in many different screen modes and refresh rates, and so that's when I got into like RGB, trying to hook up my Turbo Duo to that, and I got it working. It was not bad. In Japan, there aren't any Commodore monitors really, but old non-IBM type computer monitors work, and they have RGB inputs. So they would work with 15 kilohertz only, 15 kilohertz RGB only. And after that one kind of crapped out, I bought an NEC multi-sync tube CRT monitor. It's a nice,
What
it's
size?
a nice big 21 inches, I think.
Those were always awesome. I even remember them when they came out. I was lucky enough to have the 29-inch one, which I just got a few years ago. That was phenomenal. I loved that monitor. But.
Yeah. It doesn't do 15 kilohertz.
Oh, that one doesn't?
No, it can do 50 hertz PAL signals, so quote unquote PAL signals, but it doesn't do that. But several years ago, I bought an XRGB 2 Plus, and at the time I tested it on my another LCD computer monitor, and it had shimmering and wavy lines and it looked like shit. So I said, oh, this XRGB is crap. It's crap if you do it on an LCD monitor, probably. Right. But on a tube monitor, you don't really see any of the shimmering. It's there, but it is a quarter of a pixel wide.
Right.
And that's kind of the weak point of the XRGB 2 Plus compared to some of the other models. They do have a little bit of shimmering in the video. But actually, that upscales, or not upscales. Yeah, that upscales.
It's a line doubler, though, right?
Whereas it's a line doubler.
The XRGB 3 is like a true line doubler, and I don't think it has a lot of the shimmering issues. But
Yeah. So that was kind of the weak point of the 2 Plus. Even the XRGB 2 doesn't have that. But you have to use these knobs to, adjust stuff on that one. I bought the 2 Plus because it was really cheap on Yahoo Auctions, so I figured why not. And actually, that's what I use every day because it works fantastic on this nice big tube monitor, and it works in 50 hertz. So I have like a Commodore 128, a PAL model Commodore 128 that I use on that, and so that's what I use: XRGB 2 Plus and this nice computer monitor.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah. So that's what I use nowadays. I don't have a PVM or anything like that. Those are really expensive.
I was going to say, are they common out there at all? Are they RGB monitors?
Or? On Yahoo Auctions, which is what people use here for auction sites, you can find PVMs and maybe BVMs as well. But they get expensive. Untested, or it says junk or something like that. It's maybe like $200, and then it goes up from there.
Yeah, they're getting harder and harder to find around in North America too, and maybe just 2 or 3 years ago, not only were they cheaper and easier to find, but you could just call around to places and say, hey, do you still use these broadcast monitors? I'll come pick them all up for free. And, people would go, oh, great, awesome, yeah, take them. And,
Yeah, that's easy to do in the United States probably. In Japan, there's a language barrier, first of all.
Oh, yeah.
People toss things a lot faster and earlier in Japan. And
really?
Then also, any kind of unorthodox request, they'll go, I don't want to take responsibility for that here. So, I go to a hospital and say, hey, do you have any old monitors? And I don't know, and I'm not going to find out for you either. That's kind of the attitude you would get. So
it's the same way in America, actually. But I luckily,
really?
One of the jobs that I had, I worked, did a lot of work for hospitals for computers, like that. We would install some of the systems there. So you just got to look for the grumpiest IT guy, and then just get buddies with him, and then ask him, and then everything's cool. So it was luckily, being an IT guy myself, it was easy to spot him. And then just go bullshit with him for 10 minutes, and then ask about the monitors. And I was able to get 1 or 2 that way. So but
you probably could do that if you were a really great people person with great Japanese skills. But
the great Japanese skills is where I would fail.
Yeah.
I spent a lot of time in Taiwan and tried really hard for about 3 months to learn the basics of Mandarin. And I learned how to find the bathroom, order beer, order Jägermeister, and hail a cab on the way home. I was
Yeah.
really great at all that stuff, and that was it. That was the extent of my Mandarin Chinese. So,
Yeah.
big fail after 3 months of trying. So,
Ooh.
so
Yeah.
hey, I always made it home.
That's good. How did you manage? You say, I'm a foreigner in a strange land, take me home. Did people feel sorry for you?
Honestly, my secret was that I would get business cards everywhere. And I would always
Okay.
just get in the cab looking jet-lagged and tired, because most of the time I actually was jet-lagged and tired, and just say, hey, I'm going here, and hand them the business card. And
Okay.
because I'd learned the routes so often, I would see when, maybe they weren't used to that area or something, and go, it's a left up here. And they would do a double take, like, how the hell is he reading the signs? I thought he's just an American. And I just, no, it's over there, it's on the right, it's that building. And people would just assume that I spoke, or at least understood Mandarin, so I never
Yeah.
get messed with. I would always get home, and a lot of the cab drivers were hilarious and awesome people, so I ended up using the same ones over and over. We would just text them or something. But,
Cool.
yeah,
Yeah,
it was
that's actually an experience I have in Japan. If I have to take a taxi home, like the train stop or something, sometimes the guy doesn't know the route. Yeah, he's like, what do I do? He's looking on his navigation system, and I'd say, go straight, don't take this street, go that one, and turn left here. So I kind of backseat drive, and maybe I appear to be great at Japanese as well.
So are you fluent in Japanese, or do you just kind of speak basic?
I'm okay. I'm not fluent, but I can understand what people are saying. My wife is Japanese, and so she helps me. Of course, I've got no choice. But yeah, I'm okay. I can manage. Grammar fails me sometimes, and difficult words fail me. I couldn't do a tax return. But
I think most people can't do tax returns, so it's fine.
Yeah, I can get by in daily conversation. And even sometimes I meet up with retro gamers here, or people who are just crazy into programming, and we can talk about kind of complex stuff like how programming, or like sound techniques, audio techniques. I can kind of get by. I don't know how I did, but yeah, I could. But if like the topic is foreign to me, if it's not about programming, if it's about again taxes, or here's what this lump on your body means.
That I used to absolutely freaking love in Taiwan is when we were in a tech room talking about nerd things. We're in a room of people, and nobody, none of them spoke English, none of us spoke Mandarin. Then we were, my kind of partner in crime over there is named Jackie, and he didn't speak the greatest English. And we're friendly arguing about something. No, it should go upside down. No, it should go this way. And I recommended something, and he goes, yeah, that's perfect. And everybody else in the room who didn't speak English, they're talking in Mandarin, and they're pointing, and I could kind of sort of at this point grasp what they're talking about. Like, oh, that guy has no idea what he's talking about. It needs to go this way. And as they're pointing, I went, no, the airflow goes this way because you're going to use the rear of the computer as the heat sink. And everybody kind of was like, what the hell? Does he understand what we're talking about? How but it was just, I speak nerd. So when everybody was pointing in the same direction as I was, I got it. And everybody
you get the concepts, yeah.
Totally. And I loved stuff like that. It's like the universal language,
Yeah. Science is a universal language, and
Science
so is
and math, yeah.
Yeah. And if you fail at those, love is also a universal language. But yeah.
Absolutely. So, well, I think we got a little off track there, but I'm having fun. So I hope
I'm sorry for chatting too long. Yeah.
So the two things, the posts that you kind of pioneered were the Game Gear to Master System conversions, and you said you're kind of done with that stuff now, right?
Well, it's fun, but my time is limited nowadays. I've got a wife and I've got a kid,
right? Yeah.
And so when I was single, I could spend all weekend doing that, and maybe it took all weekend sometimes. So these long projects, I kind of shouldn't or can't do anymore. So I do think, I guess my attention span has gotten shorter too, but it's good for me. I pick up things that are fun and interesting and cool, and I can, leave it at night and then come back to it in the morning and really remember all that stuff. The Master System hacks, I kind of if I did them now, I'd probably lose track of what I was doing, where I was. So I'm kind of sticking to smaller projects mostly.
So what have you been working on lately then?
What? God. Hacking Neo Geo sound ROM drivers to cut out some of the sound channels. So I could solo just the FM the FM channels, or some of the PCM or the sample channels.
Is it for making your own soundtracks to things, or what's the purpose of that?
No, I can't make any music. I'm not a composer or anything. But God, I love video game music, and so I did that for the PC Engine TurboGrafx. I hacked PC Engine audio files, sound ROMs, sound rips to solo out the channels, and so that's what I did. I made a program that would show the notes going up the screen as the tones changed, and also people could solo out individual channels. Maybe they can use that to learn how to play it on the keyboard or guitar.
That's really cool. I like that.
Yeah, I kind of like, when there's in any game soundtrack, when there's like on the TurboGrafx or on the Neo Geo, the percussion tracks kind of distract you from the melody. If you didn't notice that before, and so for a PC Engine game, if I cut out the drum soundtrack and like the bass track, it's only the higher pitched melodies, and that actually is much clear. It becomes much clearer to my ears, and that's a way I can repeat it or reproduce it on the keyboard or something. So it's just something that interested me. Listening to individual voices on different game systems.
Do you have this posted somewhere? Or?
It's on my webpage.
Send me a direct link to that when we get off, so I could post that in the notes for that. Because that's, when Kevtris was on a couple months ago now, but we were talking about his project where he was taking basically NES games and pumping it through Atari Audio. And I was fascinated by it. I mean, I love music. Obviously, I'm in the band and everything, but I wasn't sure how other people would react to it. I thought maybe they're going to think, oh, Bob's in a band, so he's just talking about music. But we actually got a ton of great response to it. A lot of people loved it and went to his site as a result. So I guess, music and gaming kind of must go hand in hand sometimes.
Well, I mean, it's an essential part of any movie or TV show or game, quite honestly.
I know. I'd like to hear it. I'm sure people listening probably would too, so I'll put a direct link to that.
Well, I mean, it's on my page, but I also have a YouTube channel where I put old Japanese video game videos. But the most recent uploads that I've put on there have been the Neo Geo, solo sound channel solos, and I also have a couple PC Engine ones. Mm-hmm. For example, I converted Dungeon Explorer soundtrack to run as if it were on a Nintendo, an NES. So it used awesome. NES sounds. And I put up two different versions of the video on my site. One that just reduces the 6 channels of Dungeon Explorer of PC Engine down to the 4 Nintendo NES sound channels with the same sound. I also did another video where it uses arpeggios to blend those channels 6 down to 4. And in some cases it doesn't sound as good, but it's just a reprogramming. It's not a recomposing or anything.
Jeez, I love that stuff.
I mean, it's a lot of fun to do. That's what I do instead of actually creating music, because I couldn't do that. But people can actually get a direct link on my YouTube videos, and it's on my page under creations as well.
Huh, that's really awesome. I love not only the different music aspects, but people's different perspectives on it. Like, have you played another Metroid 2 remake, AM2R, from the Argentinian?
No, I haven't. No.
It's phenomenal, and he's a sound engineer by trade. So some of the music, I would rate it from awesome to holy shit awesome. Like
cool.
The lowest end is still great, but he did, I think it was the Brinstar soundtrack, but he used like a weird whistle effect, and it's just like haunting and spacey, and it's just a complete reimagining of something that somebody else already wrote. So it's just
it was just for the soundtrack.
Yeah. Oh, he offers it too for free. And I think he just posted
is this,
on
by
his
the way,
blog.
Is this, by the way, a German guy?
No, I believe he's from Argentina.
Oh, okay.
I could be wrong. I hope that doesn't make me a racist twice in the same interview. But
no.
I'm pretty sure he's Argentinian, but I'm sorry if he's not. I'm pretty sure.
I'm just going by my own stereotypes. A lot of retro games that have fantastic soundtracks, they're usually started out by a musician in Germany who makes the soundtrack first, and then they make a great game around it. Think about the games by Shinen on the Game Boy Advance and Nintendo DS. Manfred Linzer, I think his name is. He's an old Amiga musician, and he had nobody to, make games that would fit his soundtracks. So he made games that fit around his soundtracks by himself.
Pretty
and
awesome.
basically the soundtrack came first and the game came later. And that kind of repeats itself a bunch of times.
That is a very
But
German mentality. If no one else makes it the way I want it, I'll make it myself.
that's kind of my stereotype. I'm sorry, German people.
No, what a compliment. That's not a stereotype. That's a compliment.
Yeah.
So
I mean, yeah. I don't want to sound like a dumb racist or any kind of chauvinist about any country, but playing 30 years of video games, I kind of get the feeling of where does this game come from? What are the design aesthetics of certain countries?
well, the culture of a game is something that could definitely be felt while you're playing it. That's for sure. So, and that's definitely anybody that's traveled outside of whatever their own country is, doesn't matter where you came from, and you start to get exposed to different cultures. You start to get a feel of where people come from and kind of why things are the way they are. And it's just when you play the game, or even when you hear music, like Rammstein's one of my favorite bands from Germany, and it's just you just even if you didn't sing in German, that's kind of a giveaway. But even without it, like you feel it, and I love that stuff. So actually, one of the guys that helped me when I was doing the RGB cart, he was a mechanical engineer that used to design airplane terminals around the world. And then he started designing the stuff inside our computers. And he's like, did you ever see Gran Torino with Clint Eastwood?
Yeah, I have.
So he's like the German version of Clint Eastwood in that. He's old, and he's still terrifying, and he's freaking awesome. And I just called him one day. We hadn't worked together in a year, and I said, hey, I get this huge monitor. I want to build something, in his thick German accent, like, bring it over. And he just cuts it all and welds it back together, and 30 minutes later, I have the most perfect stand for my RGB monitor. So
Cool.
I love that. His buddies he built 3 cars from scratch, so his buddies nicknamed him Axel Modifies It, because every time he buys something, he modifies it.
Wow.
I love it. I love the culture and the whole mentality of like, this is how I want something. Fuck it, I'll make it this way myself. So
yeah. And there must be something good in the education system because games and retro games that come out of Germany usually have impeccable music and impeccable graphics. And I wish I had that kind of magic touch as well, or at least I wish the Canadian education system had that kind of magic as well.
That was one of the big shockers for me when I first started traveling. Was I met people from Europe, and especially like Sweden, Germany, Norway, that spoke pretty much flawless English. And one of them I'm talking to, I'm like, man, I gotta say, we've been working together for like 3 days. Where did you study English? You speak it perfectly. And he said, I haven't.
Hollywood movies.
No, he said, I haven't spoken English since high school. We've been taught since kindergarten. So, I knew it for 12 years and never spoke it. And this is the first time I've spoken it in about 7 years. So just totally different. I wish it was like that in America, but But America
it's sort of
and Canada,
that, it's sort of
they're
that way
so
in
big.
Canada.
How are you going to absorb so many other cultures when it would take 3 weeks to drive across, with the normal stops and everything. So
yeah, I know. I do believe everybody, if they can, needs to travel out of their own country, and it should be in a place that has a different language as well. That would help people for the rest of their lives, I think.
Agreed.
That's why I'm in Japan. Well, it's kind of the opposite. I should kick people out of Japan and send them to Canada so they would pick up English better, but that's kind of the way it is here.
Yeah, I was just talking to Artemio about that a few weeks ago, about how he has 2 different channels and podcasts that are specifically in Spanish, because he wants to make sure that, for all kind of English gets defaulted to a lot around the world. So he wants to make sure to get all the Spanish-speaking cultures in that maybe they speak English, but it's not really their strong point. And my buddy Francisco is from Chile. He's the same way. He's got an awesome YouTube channel, and he does almost every one of his videos in Spanish as well. So I wish I was bilingual. I would do it in as many languages as I could speak, just to try to get more people on board, because it's like, the
language barrier
is pretty small. We need as many people as we can get in it to keep it alive. So
yeah, and actually, I signed up for Twitter for the first time in June of this year. And the main reason I did that was not because Twitter's cool, but because my emails that I send to people in Japan more likely than not get filtered out as spam, just because they're not in Japanese.
Wow, I didn't know that.
I had my suspicions, like a couple of years ago. Why is this guy never answering me? Japanese friends or acquaintances. And then I met a few people, got their business cards and email addresses, and sent them messages and said, and I never got a response. And so a month later, I said, fuck this, I'm signing up for Twitter. I find the same people, and I said, hey, I sent you a message. Did you ever see it? And they said, no, I saw nothing. And I said, okay, check your spam folder. And a few people a few Japanese people said, "Oh yeah, it's in my spam folder." So basically, Japanese spam folders think that foreign languages are spam. Filters think that Japanese email filters think that non-Japanese messages are probably spam. So I can't really communicate with people. And so Twitter is basically what I signed up for to get access to the Japanese retro gaming and other world. So that's that's kind of what I need. I needed that just to do more bilingual communication. Email wasn't cutting it.
It's funny because I'm a social person. I'll talk to anybody. I love going out to the bars and just hanging out. But when it comes to social media, it just annoys me. I don't want somebody showing a selfie that they're drinking a Powerade. Like I don't care. Yeah. But Twitter and the retro gaming scene has not only been fun, but really informative. People update you with the news on it. Like, generally speaking, the people that like the stuff we do treat it like this really cool way to communicate and not annoy each other.
Yeah, so it's nice to get the feedback. Twitter could make itself annoying in the future. You never know. It all comes down to how many ads and other random things they put in there. But right now it's not so random. So the signal to noise ratio is still pretty high, and people that share your common interests with you, they post cool messages, and it is a pretty good medium between email and Facebook or something else. Yeah, but for long messages between friends, I prefer email, but that's kind of going the way of the dodo. So Twitter is it for now. Yeah.
Yeah, agreed.
Yeah, but that is how I get news and cool things in Japanese, because there aren't really any other, there aren't any news services that send out the news from Japan to the English-speaking world, really. Not that I know of. And so that's kind of how that's how I got, cool things that people are doing in Japan. Yeah. And also Artemio and other, people from Spain are on Twitter as well. So it's not just, the English language web, it's multilingual.
Right. Yeah. So one kind of thing that I've always been wondering is, so a lot of times, I would say more often than not, when I discover a game that was in, like the Japanese version of it, so Zelda, Doki Doki Panic, a lot of the original Famicom games, it's mostly 8-bit. There were a few that spilled into the 16-bit era. I'm kind of just fascinated by the changes and, the way they're different. Is it, do the Japanese retro gamers even give a shit? Are they like, yeah, it's the dumbed down American version? Or is it equal of fascination to, wow, look at my game that I loved as a kid was different somewhere else? Or is it just not even really paid attention to as much?
Well, it's a lopsided system. People in Japan get way more than people in North America did back in the retro days. So the reason we're interested is, oh my God, this never even came out here. Or we missed so much. We missed out so much. And that's the opinion that probably North Americans have. People in Japan got all that. And so the thing that's different in America, okay, look what they can't have. That's kind of a little bit of the feeling. There are people who are really, with that. There are people who are really into American games or Western games. But that's very limited. There are people who are just total obsessive fans over football games, American football games. Really? Or wrestling games. Yeah, there are people who are just crazy about that. And because they don't really come to Japan, that's kind of where they have to focus their attention. But even in the old Famitsu and other video game magazines in Japan, they do point out what's different about NES or other Western games, with pictures of an English Dragon Warrior or Zelda, or like a different title screen. And usually the news article is either, hey, wow, look at this, or it's, do you believe this? And that's kind of the attitude that they have there. So
that's funny.
It's not the amazement that I have about Japanese games that are different to North American games. It's more like, novelty. Yeah.
It's funny because it was a lot different in the music world. A band I was in got to open for a big name band. We played in front of like almost 1,000 people. It was awesome. And I got to talking to the guys afterwards, and they had toured, I think, China for the first time, but they'd been to Japan a whole bunch of times. And I just asked them, like, look, man, I don't want to be a dick or anything, but you have a couple of songs that are phenomenal that are on the Japanese-only releases of your albums. And now, now I could just download it. But as a kid, I had to spend like $50 to import this thing from Japan. Like, why would you do that to your American audience? And he kind of laughed, and he was like, it was a label decision, not ours, but it was mainly because of the different culture things. So now in hindsight, we were sitting here lusting over some of the Japanese games, and they were saying, oh, we can't get this music in Japan. So they would do the special, they would import it from America. So the only way to get them to buy the actual Japanese copy was to offer them something that you couldn't get from America. So it was, it's kind of neat how the different things collide, the same attitudes, but from opposite ends of different things. So
yeah, well, the music world is probably a lot different, and I don't know anything about it really, but it probably comes down to different tastes or what major music producers think will sell in North America versus in Japan. And then maybe in Japan things sell, there's less risk to putting out these bonus tracks or whatever. But anyway, because I don't know anything about the music industry, so much I can't say.
It was just, just looking back at this stuff, it's kind of, with the internet so instant the way it is, a lot of people complain about what's been lost, but it's really, in a good way, made the world smaller. I meet somebody through email, and then 6 months later I say, hey dude, can you pick up one of these copies of Zelda for me? And a month later I'm playing something I would have never been able to play before, and vice versa, So the same person might say, hey, I heard about this band from New Jersey, and I just email the album, and it's just, I like it. I like it a lot.
Yeah, the internet has helped kill it's helped the battle against region locking and all that stuff.
Yeah.
Definitely you can get almost anything you want if you know somebody or if you search online. Yeah.
It's still weird that there's region locking of games, though. I don't really understand that. I don't understand the purpose anymore.
Well, technically, it can be done a lot easier nowadays than before. So, the producer in whatever country will say, flip that switch, lock it from other countries, just because it creates less headaches for them. Yeah, so it's easy for the game publishers to do, and they'll lose nothing if it's if they sell it only in the region they're intending to sell it to. So they have nothing to lose to region lock. It creates bad will, but hey, you can't put $ on bad will.
True.
By the way, so I was going to say about like the American version of games for the PlayStation. There are a couple PlayStation games in Japan where they would release the sequel to something, and in the same CD case as the sequel, they had the original American version. So
really,
yeah. So for example, I think maybe not Ridge Racer. Ridge Racer has a high spec version, Ridge Racer High Spec, where it's the original game but interlaced and stuff. And I think it has like the original disc as well, but the English version. And I know that Tomb Raider 2 or 3, Tomb Raider 3. The Japanese version. I have the disc, and it also has the U.S. version of Tomb Raider 1. The English version. It's thrown in as a bonus, kind of. So with a few Japanese PlayStation games, they threw in a bonus disc with the American version of the prequel. And so that's kind of ties into getting the foreign version. I don't know why they did that.
I think it's a cool idea, though.
It's cool, yeah. Yeah, so I think I have like an English version of Tomb Raider 1 that I bought in Japan, yeah. And it says, Kaigaibon, Japanese version, or foreign version, or English version, or something like that. Yeah.
I remember one of the biggest differences, I think, was the Splatterhouse games looked different on the PC Engine. There was a couple of them that I really just thought. And then, obviously the Famicom expansion audio for all those games. But, I don't know, I'm really glad that I got to experience a lot of these things now, too, especially, like, in the original hardware with the Famicom and the Famicom disk system, but I never knew that the PlayStation had some of the original releases as well. That's kind of cool.
It's interesting, yeah.
So, I don't know, we kind of downplayed a lot of the stuff you did. We talked a little bit about the Game Gear and about the music and about the Game Boy Advance stuff. And you got to give me.
You can edit this later, hopefully.
No, I don't. I generally, the only podcast I've ever edited is, I think I was talking to Wes from Second Opinion Games, and we talked about a release date, and we both got it wrong. So I cut that part out. But other than that, it was it. People seem to either like it or just, if they don't, they drone out and not,
Okay.
or they're pretty nice in the comments. But is there anything we forgot to talk about? Anything else that that you've been working on that you wanted to promote or anything? Because, I mean, I don't know if you realize, but a lot of times when you research RGB or a lot of these things, your name is one of the first that comes up. So whether you like it or not, you've been ingrained in the history of these things. So
honestly, I'm quite surprised. People say, hey, I wanted to talk to you. I'm kind of shocked. Like, why? The RGB thing kind of came out of old EGM magazines where they said, hey, look, you can hook up your Genesis to a Commodore monitor via RGB. And people were saying, oh, that's great, that's awesome. And that's kind of where the ball got rolling. And when I got an Amiga, I tried doing that because the Amiga monitors did lots of different resolutions and scan rates. In Japan, TVs actually had an RGB connector. So
was it a JP21 connector?
Yeah, it's a JP21 connector.
Okay.
Yeah, so for a length of time, Japan had RGB, and the UK and Europe had RGB, and Australia probably did, Oceania did, but North America didn't really. And so, yeah, that's kind of like why when I came to Japan, great, an RGB monitor, let's hook up all my old systems. How do you hook up all old systems? Here's how I did it. So I made a web page about that.
And there you go. And at the time, you were probably one of the few crossovers that spoke English but understood what was coming from it. So
yeah,
some of your posts were back from early 2000s, right?
Yeah. I think I put up my first web page back in like 1996, probably around 96, and I put like my Amiga fanboy stuff on there first, and then Famicom fanboy stuff up there, and then it kept on going. When I started programming for the NES, I put up my games I made or demos that I made, and then when I came to Japan, I tried doing Game Gear and Sega Master System programming, and then I went on to PC Engine programming, and that's kind of what I've been doing a lot more of in Japan. So nothing to promote really, but what I've been active most during the last 10 years is doing kind of cool things with the TurboGrafx or PC Engine. I made a couple games, and they are kind of being sold on cartridge nowadays by somebody else.
And are they playable on ROM carts if people have the Turbo Everdrive?
Yeah, absolutely. They're free to download from my site as a ROM. So if you have an Everdrive, you don't need to buy anything.
Yeah, definitely give me links to all that stuff. I'm sure I want to spread it around.
Yeah. My web page is www.chrismcovell.com, and my YouTube channel is also www.chrismcovell.com. So the same thing, just no dots in there.
Gotcha.
And yeah, that's how people can find it.
Awesome.
So I got married about 9 years ago, so less free time. That's kind of the reality.
Well, you've certainly made your mark, man, because I think you were the first to post info on the Game Gear stuff, and there's over 50 now. You were the first to really post detailed info on one of the innovation adapters, and now I think that page has had like 50,000 hits on my site. I credited you. I didn't steal your work or anything. I think I even emailed you about it. But
I think you did,
the first couple things that you really posted about have really laid the groundwork for what a lot of people are doing now. So really glad to come on and just kind of hang out and talk with you. And usually I have a beer in my hand, but I haven't been feeling well today, so I've just been Powerade it today.
Okay.
So I appreciate it. What is it, like 8 a.m. there now, 9 a.m.?
It's almost 11 o'clock.
There you go. So you will not.
I've got to
hands.
I've got to head off to work in like 10 minutes. So.
All right, cool. Well, thanks so much for doing this. I will post the links to all your stuff in the comments and everything. And good to finally put a face to all the posts I've been reading all these years.
Yeah, my pleasure. Yeah, it was great to chat with you too.
Cool. Well, take care, man, and I'll see everybody else next week.
Yeah, thank you.